Facebook friends. Hope that everybody is doing well today. Good morning, Facebook friends. I hope everyone is doing well today. Appreciate you joining me. Today is as we're continuing our Holy Week. Yesterday we celebrated Palm Sunday, and today I want to share with you a story in the week that Jesus led up to his crucifixion and his resurrection. The story is in all four Gospels. So anytime that we find that a story about Jesus is recorded in all four Gospels, then I think it's something that we really need to look at. I'll be looking at chapter 26 of Matthew, and you can get your concordance. You can find out this story is included in Mark, Luke, and also John. It's recorded later in Matthew than it is in the other Gospels, and it might be because of the way that the author put the stories together. But some people seem to think that there was two occurrences of this story, and it could be. But my point is that it was recorded in all four of them, and so I believe it has some great importance. So what I want to talk to you today about is a story we're going to look at about a woman coming to Jesus, and she anoints his head with some very costly perfume. And Jesus called this thing a beautiful thing. And it was. It was an act of worship. And Jesus said that this story would be told by this lady throughout the ages. And in the story, what I want us to learn is this: what it really means to give Jesus worship. What it really means to truly love him. So let's read the story together, found in Matthew 26, verses 6 through 13, I believe. It says, while Jesus was in Bethany in the home of a man named Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar, a very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. When his disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste, they asked. This perfume could have been sold for a very high price and the money given to the poor. Being aware of this, Jesus said, why are you bothering this woman? She's done a beautiful thing. The poor you always have with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured the perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for my burial. I'll tell you the truth. Wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done also be told in memory of her. May God have his blessings in reading and hearing, understanding, and the application of his holy word. When we compare these stories and we read them in the different gospels, Mark, Luke, and John, along with Matthew, records this story. There are some differences. Luke, for example, mentions that this woman was a sinful woman, and she came to anoint Jesus with his costly oil. In other words, she was a woman with a past. I think we all have a past. We all come to Jesus with a past. But it doesn't matter. Her past didn't matter to Jesus, and our past doesn't matter to him. We all come with this past. We all come with past of sometimes very sinful desires, sinful things in our past. And sometimes that makes us feel that we're unworthy to worship God. Sometimes it makes me feel like we have no right to worship God. But sometimes we put these labels on ourselves. But Jesus doesn't. Because see, your past doesn't matter to Jesus. It doesn't prevent you from giving your best to him today. And that's one point I want you to understand. Your sinful past is forgiven when you give your life to Jesus. It doesn't prevent you from worshiping him. It doesn't prevent you from honoring him. It doesn't prevent you from loving him. It doesn't prevent you from serving him. And no one should be able to keep you from that. So don't let your past hold you back. So now I want to share with you real briefly 3 things. Jesus is worthy to receive our best. Let's go back to verses 6 and 7. It says, while Jesus was in Bethany in the house of a man named Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar, a very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. Matthew said that it was very expensive. Mark goes into more detail in his gospel, and he says it was worth around 300 denarii, which in that day was worth about a year's worth of wages. So if we take the common denominator of today of having of income based upon minimum wage, we would have somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000. Can you imagine a bottle of perfume costing that much? Then can you imagine someone taking that and pouring it on somebody's head? That's what this lady did. You might be asking the question, why would she do this? Because she realized in her spirit that Jesus is worth the very best we can give him. And you and I need to realize that today. That Jesus is worth the very best that we can give him. I don't know what the woman's situation was, but obviously she evidently was a woman of means, or she acquired this valuable perfume somehow, some way. The point of the story is not that we should be extravagant beyond our means. I'm not saying that at all, and that's not what the author is saying either. The point of the story is simply this: we should be extravagant in our service to Jesus, to God, as we can afford to be. And of course, I'm definitely talking more than just money. Don't get hung up on the money aspect of it. I'm talking more about that. There's a story told about a young man, which you'll recognize his name real soon. Youth director came to him when he was in England. And he says, we need to get together and to pray and to worship and study the Bible. And the youth leader asked a student, youth member, what day is the best day? And the student thought for a minute and says, well, to young people, Saturday night's the best day of the week. So let's give God Saturday night. So they met together, set aside Saturday night, and began to meet and worship God. The teenager that I'm speaking about in this story is a person you'll recognize. His name is Matt Redman. He's a writer of such songs as The Heart of Worship, Let My Words Be Few, Once Again, and several other songs that he wrote. Those Saturday night meetings started a worship movement in the church that reached literally thousands of people, young people all across England. The point is this: particularly during this Holy Week, and particularly at any time, Jesus is worth the very best that you can give him. Do you really want to learn how to love Jesus, how to worship him, how to serve him, how to please him? Just simply give him your best. Give him the best of your day. Give him the best part of your week. Be extravagant to him as you can afford to be. See, Jesus doesn't expect us to give more than we have. But when we give our very best to him, he is pleased. The second thing I find in this story is this. It has been true in my life. He is worth our he is worth the criticism that you'll face by serving him. It's sad, but it's true. When you do something for Jesus, you have to endure criticism just like this lady did, on some level or some fashion. And the most frustrating thing about it is that it often comes from those you least expect it, from those that you least expect critical of you. And this story is a perfect example. In fact, the most shocking, most unbelievable part of this story is found in verse 8. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste? They asked. Did you get that? They called her act of worship waste. The gift that she was giving Jesus, waste. She might not have known it, or maybe her spirit told her she was preparing his body for his death, in a way. And they considered this waste. That's a little sad, isn't it? But let's not be too hard on disciples. How many times have we done this? Can you imagine yourself saying, after you bought your wife a beautiful dress, what a waste? Or you go out and have a nice meal or a nice evening, and you say to yourself, what a waste? It's hard to imagine, isn't it? Yet, that's exactly what we do sometimes when we see other people give to God. Disciples in this case were wrong. But sometimes we're wrong also. Giving the best we have to Jesus is never a poor use of our resources. Ministering to him, worshiping him, sacrificing for him is never a waste. The disciples, and sometimes we, miss the point. This teaches us a little something about critics. While the woman was doing something for Jesus, while she was ministering to Jesus, the disciples were not doing anything. And that's the chief characteristic of a critic. Normally, they're the ones not doing anything. They're the ones not even trying to do anything for God. They just criticize what everybody else is doing or what you're doing. When you give your best to Jesus, keep in mind that some people just won't get it. They'll find fault in what you're doing. They might even criticize your motives or your methods. But what I found out in life is this, that oftentimes criticism is a smokescreen that people use because they're the ones not doing anything. And the point is this, don't let the criticism stop you from worshiping Jesus, expressing your love to him. I had a friend who graduated from a very prestigious seminary. He decided to follow his ministry track, not the typical ministry track. Instead of taking an appointment as a pastor of a church, he decided to spend his life on the mission field, serving the poorest of the poor. People were shocked that he did this. They were shocked that he would not follow the traditional trajectory of going into the ministry and climbing up the ladder, becoming successful one church after another, moving from one church to a larger church as time passed. But instead, he would give his life to serve the poorest of the poor. It's like they're saying, you know, those poor people aren't as good enough for your potential as other people are. See, when we give Jesus our best, there'll be those who will criticize us, find fault in our actions, challenge our integrity, criticize our methods. And oftentimes it'll come from those that you least expected. But when we challenge you, don't let it stop you. Don't let the criticism hold you back. Give your best to Jesus and don't waste your time. Don't waste your resources. In fact, giving Jesus our best pleases him. In other words, as he said about this lady, it's a beautiful thing. It's worth the criticism. I remember when I was younger, back in the 70s, just getting started in ministry. And I was in a small shop in the town that I was working in at that time. And these people told me that I was living a pipe dream. And it's okay. And maybe in some areas of my life and the ministry the last 30 some years, they were right. But they weren't totally right. Because I believe that what God has called me to do and what he's asked me to do over these 40 years of serving him has been what he wanted me to do. And I hope that he will say, it's a beautiful thing. But no matter what you do, people will find fault. Mark Rutland, a good pastor friend of mine that I got to know when I also was working in the 70s, make these statements. And every time a train goes by, the dogs bark. They don't affect the train, but they bark. So whatever you do, people are going to criticize. So just let them bark. As long as you know it's right, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons, as long as you're doing it for the right motivation, just let the dogs bark. And you keep on doing what God's called you to do. Third thing I want to point out today is this. Jesus is worth our attention right now. I know this week we're focusing on the Holy Week, and I hope it'll be a time in which that you will focus your attention on Jesus and what he did for you. But you know, what about the rest of the year? Our focus should always be on him. Jesus said something in this passage of Scripture in verse 11 that is often misinterpreted and often been abused. He said in verse 11, the poor you always have with you. And some social-minded critics will voice the same objection the disciples voiced. We could tuck that oil and sold it, perfume and sold it, and we could have had a bunch of money to do ministry with. And that is true. Other people will look at this verse and justify social inaction. They'll say things like, well, we always have the poor, so why even try? Why even bother trying to work with them? They'll always be poor. But see, that's not the point Jesus was making. The point Jesus was making was this. Listen to verse 10. Why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for my burial. You know, helping the poor is a good thing. And we should be committed to doing that whenever we can. And Jesus also makes that commandment. But he's telling the disciples at this point, at this time, in the life of their devotion to him, the most important thing was being with him, expressing a devotion to him. He said we're not going to be with him physically very long. Even though we don't have Jesus physically with us today, we do have him with us spiritually. He's with us all the time now, 24/7, 365. His spirit resides in us. His presence is with us. The difference isn't that the woman had access to an expensive bottle of perfume and disciples didn't. The difference in the story is just simply this. Her heart was focused on ministry to Jesus, and theirs was. So the question we need to ask ourselves today is simply this. Where is my heart? Where am I focused? And this Holy Week, am I focused on Jesus? The rest of the year, am I focusing on Jesus? Does God want me to do this? Does God want me to do that? And I know some people say, well, Pastor, that's crazy. To ask Jesus if he wants you to go here or go there. I don't think it's crazy. I think God wants us to rely upon him, to totally be dependent upon him at all times. He cares about every aspect of our life. See, she was willing to do something right now. And the disciples just hanging around. They remind me sometimes about people that are real interested in doing, prefer to talk about things, but never get around to doing anything. See, they can make a decision on how they should spend the money, what they should do with the perfume. They just talked. And sometimes we run into people that prefer to talk than actually do anything. See, Jesus was about to die a horrendous death. In a few days, he would be beaten, struck, mocked, ridiculed, spat upon, tortured, and murdered. She was doing what she could now because she would not have the opportunity to do it later. You know, it's sad to realize that just in a few days, just after, within a week of everybody singing Hosanna to God as Jesus rode in Jerusalem, this triumphant entry that we talked about yesterday, that just in a few days he would be abandoned by almost everyone. It's hard to comprehend. And yet, disciples wanted to argue about how they could spend the money instead of her pouring it upon him. See, the difference between the disciples and this lady was that she worshiped Jesus in the present tense. Her heart was focused upon him. She worshiped him in the now. She served him in the now. My question today for us is this: do we want to worship Jesus in a way that pleases him? If we do, then we'll do something now today to worship him, to honor him. I hope you've already done it this morning. I hope you had your quiet time, your devotion, your prayer time. It's a great way to start your day. Do something now. It doesn't do us any good to talk about things we should do, or if we're not willing to do them. We have to do them now, at this moment. So what can you do? He's worth your attention right now. Let's not forget the phrase that Jesus said in verse 10 about this lady. She done a beautiful thing for me. What beautiful thing have you done for Jesus? This story shows us how to express our love to God, how to worship Him, how to serve Him in a way that pleases Him. And it simply boils down to this: give Him the very best you have to give. The best of your resources, the best of your time, your energy, your strength, and your abilities. And even if other people don't get it, even if they criticize you and find fault in what you do, give them the best anyway. And most importantly, do it now. Give him the best of your today. He's worth it. God bless you, and I hope you join tomorrow. We'll look at some teachings that Jesus gave during the final week of his life. And I hope that God will speak to me and he'll allow me to bring some meaning to them so it'll encourage your life. God bless you and have a super day.